Welcome to the only daily podcast focusing on compliance news of the day. Each morning, start your day with a cup of coffee and Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, to hear about 4 of the top compliance, corruption, or leadership stories you will need to start your day. The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network.
First, a word from our sponsor. The Daily Compliance News for December 4, 2021, the SPACs Go South edition. And we begin with that story from New York Times Dealbook, reporting on the BuzzFeed SPAC, which is off to a rocky start to becoming a public company. The company had thought it would raise or hoped to raise $250 million, but it only raised $16 million when BuzzFeed went public. The problem with that, of course, is SPACs have a money-back guarantee because investors don't know what company a SPAC plans to acquire. They have an opportunity to redeem their shares at the IPO price before a merger is official. SPAC redemption rates have been about 50% this year, up from 20% last year, but it really points to material weakness of SPACs going forward. Next up, from Reuters, Russia's state communication regulator has filed cases against the U.S. tech firms Google and the company formerly known as Facebook based upon their annual turnover in Russia. And this is amping up of fines against both Facebook and Google, and it's going to present a new challenge for companies who are doing business in authoritative regimes such as Russia and China. So when you have the annual turnover of Facebook or Google in Russia, you know you're going to get to a pretty high number. Next up, the tentacles of Odebrecht continued to bounce around in the corruption world as the son of the former Panamanian President has pled guilty in the continued fallout of the Odebrecht case. Luis Enrique Martinelli pled guilty on Thursday to a charge of his involvement in a bribery scheme involving Odebrecht. He was charged with his brother. He was captured in Guatemala and extradited to the United States. He admitted knowingly and intentionally entering into a fraud, or rather conspiracy to funnel money to a close relative using offshore companies. So the Odebrecht case still lingers. And finally, from the Wall Street Journal, Mingy Sun in the Risk and Compliance Journal, the Senate has confirmed President Biden's nominee for the sanction chief, as Brian Nelson was approved by the Senate as Treasury Department's Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Crimes, a critical post for national security and foreign policy. Following objections inane objections, you have to say, from Senate Republicans going forward. So it looks like Treasury has got its sanctions chief in place. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays up, or rather plays out in the sanctions world. And I know you AML practitioners out there and sanctions and export control folks will be watching as well.
The Daily Compliance News is a production of the Compliance Podcast Network and a proud member of C-Suite Radio. Thanks so much for listening. I hope you'll join me again tomorrow.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.